If you've spent any significant amount of time in Fresno, and certainly if you grew up here, you've shared a space with the work of Stan Bitters. It's both incongruent to and everywhere in the landscape, part of the texture of this sprawling rural city. Stan's been making what he calls architectural ceramics since the late 1950s. One of his most well-known local landmarks are the large murals outside the Duncan Ceramics building in southeast Fresno. Fresno is a city usually driven rather than walked, and this is drive-by art at large scale. The sculptures spaced and oriented in such a way to be easily taken in at speed. Thinking about Stan's work is a good way to begin thinking about public space in the city. I first encountered it while walking around the Fulton Mall, a 6-block urban sculpture park in the heart of downtown. Built in the 1960s, the mall had suffered from a lack of investment in the intervening decades. And by the time I got to know it, the mall had failed in the metrics of capital by which public spaces increasingly are judged. It was deemed unsafe, inconvenient, and worst of all, unproductive. It was poised to be redeveloped in a plan that would reopen the street to traffic in hopes of attracting a new crowd to downtown. As arresting as Stan's sculptures are to glimpse from a fast-moving car, they're even more rewarding up close. The sculptures on the Fulton Mall are knobby and irregular, and by the time I saw them, weathered from spending 5 decades exposed to Fresno's intense summer heat. While many of Stan's large murals look like aerial maps or diagrams of cityscapes, many of his freestanding sculptural forms obliquely reference the human figure. And to me, the groupings on the Fulton Mall look like oddball family gatherings, probably because, seeing them in the context of the mall, a place often frequented by young families, I saw them as some kind of sculptural analogue. I found out later that this is completely wrong. In the case of the Fulton Mall pieces, these forms actually reference standpipes, a freestanding water pipe you see everywhere in the fields around here. But this is the generosity of Stan's work. He brings humanness to every surface he touches. Stan uses the word attitude a lot when describing his figures. They have attitude as a certain posture, affect, a way of being in the world. It's assumed rather than fixed. They stand around, lean, slouch, are rotund, short or tall, with rough, scored surfaces and blobs and bits that protrude like body parts. I don't think Stan's sentimental about his work, and he's reticent when it comes to discussing the big ideas behind it. His favourite response when asked to expand on his idea is, "I just make them and then they're done. Isn't that how you do it?" His is an embodied practice. He's just as happy to see his sculptures weathered and used as a climbing frame by children as he is to ship his murals to fancy hotel chains in New York and LA. Stan's work is meant to be seen in both exterior and interior landscapes, and over the past few years he's been engaged in not only building the sculptures but also the landscape in which they sit, turning the garden of his home into a sculpture park in an ongoing earthworks project. I think that the public availability of Stan's work in a city without numerous opportunities for seeing and experiencing art is subtly and deeply influential in the lives of people who grow up here. His work is highly tactile. The surfaces are grooved, organic, and strange, so different from the more mannered or slick public art that you often see in cities. Their grooves hold dirt. They allow for accumulation of texture, time, and meaning.
Well, this is our current project. It's a mural for a wall in Brooklyn, New York, for the Ace Hotel. And we've been involved with this project for over a year. Uh, Due to a number of factors, mostly engineering problems, we're still sitting here twiddling our thumbs. I think I probably stand out because of the monumentality I like to refer to as the architectural inclusion in buildings. And this is a niche that I acquired early in the game from working at Hand Sump Company in the late 50s, and have not really stopped doing it as we've gone through with architectural changes in the country. The development of the mural or an add-on to exterior or interior of the building forms has become of great interest, and there's not much competition going on in that particular field. So I am pretty much really departed from a so-called Potter studio in terms of where we assume a lot of wheel-thrown objects are made all under the control of your two hands and a small wheel. And I gave that up early in the game to continue with tonnage of material is what it's required. So the reality of big business started affecting me early in the days.
It's interesting to hear you talk about the sort of industrial nature of it, because they also still feel very kind of rough and organic. There's a warmth to these surfaces that you create that is about, I think, hands and hands touching material.
I've always maintained an earthy approach to projects in terms of being honest to the material and trying to keep that aspect alive. I think through various means, potters tend to eventually end up completely throttling the exterior form until you aren't really sure if it's plastic or ceramic. And I think this is an issue that I'm very aware of, and during large projects like this, in keeping that basic animalistic attitude, if you will, from the days of Altamira caves in Spain. I think that attitude of where we all began as human beings is hopefully evident in my work as it progresses to the more industrialized activity of buildings and form. And so I think it's appreciated from the standpoint of that difference. In the late 50s, when I was at SUMF, I did some large forms. I called them the potato people. And occasionally I bring up that attitude, which I have done here again. And this time I'm playing with top knots as the big feature of the guys underneath. And what's great about it is that we're using a spray metal over a bis clay form. We spray liquid steel and then put a rust patina over it, and gives it a nice attitude, which I really love. So we're working on a group of them that there's probably about 3 more over on the sideline that will be added to this collection. Yeah, this is our basic kiln for especially doing large projects, and as I mentioned before, tall sculptural forms. We've got a bed that we start with down at the base here that essentially is a 5 by 6 foot area, and we can put in about a 7 foot tall figure that will get reduced to 6 feet. And this is the interior. Basically, it's a soft brick kiln. As you can see, there are a lot of burners. And this was built in '69, and it's showing wear and tear pretty much all over here. But we're still doing it, and it'll last until it falls in. No, I just build them and then finish them, and that's it.